The book is Francona, the Red Sox years. Terry Francona, the former skipper there, won a couple of World Series titles. Now with the Cleveland Indians. Terry back on the program. You know, first thing that popped into my head when I realized that you had written a book with Dan Shaughnessy was, why? What made you write a book about those years?
Well, I actually hadn't thought of it myself. And when the season was over, Dan approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. And to be kind of blunt, my answer was no, and not with you. And, because of Dan's job and my job, we're kind of almost put in an adversarial position. You know, he was paid to be a kind of a cynical, sometimes sarcastic columnist. He was really good at it. And, I was there to try to protect the players and win as many games as we could. So it put us at odds sometimes. He asked me if I would give it at least a shot, like on a trial basis. And the more we did it, I started really enjoying it. And once we really got into it, it was actually a lot of fun, and we've become friends. I tease him all the time, telling him I'd never tell people that, but we actually have a really good relationship.
What was the story that you almost didn't put in the book?
What do you mean?
Was there one
we left out?
Yeah, one that you really hesitated about putting in.
You know what, Dan? There was a lot of stuff. I probably read the book from front to end about 7 times, which is hard to do, when it's about yourself, because I already know it myself, and I find myself kind of boring. But I was really, you've been around me long enough and you've talked to me enough to know how much I care about, the Clubhouse culture and things like that. So if there was a topic that I thought was important or interesting, and maybe somebody would, I don't know if wants to have a problem with, but maybe it was a little bit critical, I would have Dan go talk to them. And if they weren't comfortable, or if they, we would take it out. So anytime there was anything at all that I thought was remotely, I don't want to say controversial, but maybe critical is the right word, or, something happened that wasn't good, Dan would go talk to the guy, and then we were able to use it, and I felt okay about it.
You write that Curt Schilling popped a stitch so he was able to pitch in the ALCS and the World Series as well. If he doesn't pop that stitch, do we have a bloody sock?
You know what? The timeline of that is, I'm not exactly sure. I just know it was pinching him, and I found this out later. You know what, Dan? I had so much faith in Schill that I probably never gave it enough concern that he wouldn't pitch, let alone win. I'd just been around him long enough to know that nothing was going to stop him. I mean, we actually had to sit down with him before this all happened and say, Schill, look, this is, obviously we wanted him to pitch, but it's like, Schill, this has got a chance to hurt you down the road. And he's like, I know. And it probably did. But I bet you if you asked Schill, he wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. He had waited his whole life to be on that stage and pitch that game, and he was bound and determined he was going to do it.
Well, we know that it added to sort of the Hollywood feel to it with the bloody sock. If it was all stitched up, granted, I was there and actually saw him running to the bullpen with that protective boot on that he was wearing. And we thought that he was looking for a little attention. There was no way we thought he was going to pitch. But if you don't have the bloody sock attached to this, it's just a gutty performance of a guy out there on the mound, right?
Well, you know what? So many stories get played up as time goes on. I actually think this one was underplayed.
Really?
Yeah, that's how much I thought of what he did. And I mean, again, I saw it firsthand. I saw what he went through. He had no business pitching in that game, let alone pitching as effectively as he did. And I got to see it firsthand. It was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen.
How close were you to scratching him, saying, there's no way I'm going to put you on the mound?
Well, no. That's what's even – no, I wasn't close. That's how much faith I had in him. I mean, I just figured, again, there was a lot going on. Well, when he said he could do it, I figured he'd do it. I had a lot of faith in him. Again, I've never been around a player as much as Schill. It had been Philadelphia. I had him in Boston. And I had a lot of faith in him.
He's Terry Francona, the Indian skipper. The book is The Red Sox Years, joining us at Dan Patrick Show. Whiskey shots before the game when you're going to cowboy up in 04. Why was it okay then? And beer and wings and video games, your last year there was not?
Wow. again, it's the perception is it's because we won. It's that's again. I didn't know the beer, the shot stuff. I remember walking into the clubhouse in St. Louis towards the end, and I was like, "Whoa!" I thought they were kind of teasing. It kind of took me by surprise because I remember telling Theo, "Hey, I wasn't here, man."
Wait, so you didn't know they were doing that pregame toast?
No, because that's probably maybe it's a half hour before the game or 20 minutes before the game, whatever it is. By that time, I'm long gone. I'm out in the dugout. One of the days in St. Louis, I had come back because I left one of my lineup cards in my office, and I saw all the guys in the middle of the clubhouse, so I walked over, and that was the first time I'd actually ever seen it. And I walked by Theo, like, Theo, you didn't see me here.
But there was a moment, though, you went from being a player's manager. Everybody loved playing for you. You were honest with them. You let them be men. When did it happen with this group, the last group, that they started to take advantage of you being a player's manager?
The last year, we had lost some coaches, guys like John Farrell, Brad Mills, and we still had really good coaches, but guys that knew me so well, that knew, if I wasn't in the room, things would still get done the way I wanted them to get done. So I was probably having to be a little bit more hands-on. Especially with the pitchers, and I think they weren't used to that. I just felt like, again, maybe it was me, maybe it was them, maybe it was a combination. But I think my shelf life was starting to come to an end there. We had a meeting in Toronto towards the end of the year because things were bothering me that was going on with the team. And I just wanted to tell them. I felt like I had an obligation to say, look, guys, we're good, and we have a chance to win. But for a team that has a chance to win, we sure let a lot of things bother us. And I remember when the meeting was over, walking back into the coach's room and thinking, man, that kind of fell on deaf ears. And I was frustrated by that because I had never really felt like that before.
How distracted were you? There published reports with your health, having a son in Afghanistan, being honest with the overall picture. Were you distracted when you were managing?
You know what? I have a lot going on. I'm probably the best person in the world at compartmentalizing things. When a game's going on, I would say never. And that's maybe not a good thing that I'm able to compartmentalize things that much. But I did have a lot going on. I was worried about a lot of things. But baseball was kind of the saving grace for me. I mean, I kind of threw myself into it probably more than ever. So I would say no.
As far as sexing up the Red Sox and reading the excerpts here, that did they do a focus group where ownership said we need to have eye candy on the field, I guess, for lack of a better description here? Was it sexing it up like that? Or big names?
Yeah, I think probably more the big names. I don't know. Again, these are things that I found out after I was a manager. So I didn't have to worry about this when I was a manager. Again, Theo shielded me from a lot of stuff like this because I didn't care or it'd probably aggravate me. So I didn't have to deal with that when I was a manager.
I'd be still managing the Red Sox if what?
Oh, probably if September wasn't so miserable. You know what? It was a horrible month, and as a manager, when your team plays like that, you're wide open for criticism. There were probably things that were starting to happen there that were bothering me that didn't used to bother me, and when that starts happening, that's on me. And I kind of openly admit that I was getting frustrated by things that maybe I had handled before, and when that starts happening, maybe it's time to think about moving on. Favorite
Manny story?
Oh, there's a million of them. There's a million of them. I mean, I guess the one that makes me laugh the most was when he was in St. Louis in Game 4, I think it was, of the World Series, and he and Yadier Molina were kind of going back and forth, and Chuck Merriweather was the umpire, and he called me out, and he goes, Tito, they're yelling at each other in Spanish. I'm like, Chuck, I don't speak Spanish. So I go, Manny, what's the deal? And he goes, they're accusing me of stealing their signs. And I looked at him, and I said, he doesn't even know our signs. and he kind of nodded like, yeah, he's right. And first pitch, line drive, base hit.
What role do you play or do managers play if you know that one of your players is using or players are using? We found out Manny, was cheating. I'm sure other players come under suspicion. But as the manager, how much did you care about that?
Dan, that's actually a tough question. It's not a bad question. I don't think I ever thought about it, and I had no education on it, on the background or anything like that, on what to look for. I think I was probably very naive about it. I think as an industry in the whole, I think our whole industry was probably naive about it for a long time. And I think now we're paying the price for it. I mean, with the Hall of Fame voting that just took place, nobody went in. I mean, it's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to a lot of players. It's not fair to the writers. I would hate to have a vote right now. I mean, you're kind of the judge and jury, and you're doing a lot of guessing, and I think unfair is the best word I can come up with.
The expectations in Cleveland as opposed to Boston?
You know what? It doesn't matter, because I know what my expectations are is that we'll compete and we'll try to find a way to win. I think it's definitely a different culture. It's the Midwest as opposed to the East. Being a manager in Boston is, like I said, the book is the hardest job I ever had, but I loved it. It's really hard.
But it aged you. I thought it was dog years for you. When I would see you and I'd see you the next year, I go, man, you look 7 years older.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
But you look so much younger now, though.
What's funny is when I got to Boston, I didn't think I was ready to be a male model. But when I left Boston, I see pictures of when I was younger, and I'm like, God, did I get old? So yeah, I get your point.
Congrats and good luck with the Cleveland Indians. Always good to talk to you, Tito.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Take care, man.
All right, Terry Francona.